Hello everyone. They say the forest remembers every footstep, and sometimes, it remembers you. Tonight, you'll hear 3 true encounters from people who stepped into the woods and came back changed forever. These aren't legends, they're real stories told by those who survived. So, put on your headphones, turn off the lights, and let's begin. Story 1. I went out alone for a day hike because I needed the trees to remind me of order. The trailhead I chose was small and often empty. My pack was light: water, a sandwich, a thin jacket, a compass, and an old map with creases so deep they had become permanent. The morning started ordinary, with sunlight spearing through the leaves and small birds staking out their territory in song. For the first 2 hours everything was as expected. The trail rose and fell, roots caught my boots, a stream glinted and I followed its curve. At an unmarked fork I chose a path that looked less used. The left trail seemed to invite me with softer soil and a scent of pine that made me breathe easier. The path narrowed until branches scratched at my arms. Little marks of human passage, a ribbon tied to a branch, a scratched initial on a rock, started appearing and then, oddly, repeating. You know how sometimes you take a wrong turn and notice it soon enough to correct? This was different. The landscape itself seemed to repeat in pocketed scenes. I would pass a sun-bleached log and later see the same log positioned the same, moss exactly where I'd seen it. I began to suspect that I had been walking in a circular loop, but not a normal one. The loop felt edited, an old reel being replayed. I tried to mark my route. I stacked small stones, tore a strip of cloth and tied it to a branch, broke a twig and placed the pieces at an angle. I moved on, determined to outsmart the woods. Yet when I reached the clearing that should have been new, my markers were either gone or rearranged. There were now symbols I hadn't placed, tiny spirals laid out in a pattern, the same number of leaves pressed flat on a stump, a smoothed patch of earth as if someone had been kneeling there. My sense of time warped. The sun slanted and then climbed as if someone were skimming a day back and forth. My phone was dead. I drank the last of my water and felt a noise pressing at the edges of my hearing, the low chatter of something that wasn't the stream or the wind. My breath was loud. At one point I thought I saw another hiker watch me from behind a copse. When I called out there was only the sound of my echo answering itself. Panic tasted metallic. I forced myself to walk with method. Compass in hand, I chose a bearing and walked until my legs burned. After an hour the trees thinned and the path opened to a small road where a farmer's truck pulled over. An old man leaned from the cab and asked if I was lost. He told me, "There's a reel in those pines. Folks go in and come back to the same page. We put markers near the edge to help." He pointed to a spray-painted X and a number on a tree. The relief in that moment was like taking off a heavy coat. But relief didn't erase the memory. I kept thinking of the tiny arranged leaves and the way the light had stalled. When I went home I noticed odd things. I had scratches on my forearm in a pattern of 3, like the numbers traced in the dirt. Some nights I'd wake convinced the house smelled faintly of pine. Months later I ran into a forum of hikers sharing similar stories. Someone had a shaky photo of a clearing with spirals, someone else spoke of a reel where time folded back on itself. The forest had kept a little of me, and I had kept a little of those trees. I no longer take that stretch alone. Story 2. This one began as a weekend trip with college friends. We carried too much food and told too many old jokes as we set up camp in a low clearing. We made a ring of stones for the fire and stacked wood until our arms ached. Night fell and the sky turned clear and generous with stars. It was the kind of night where you think the universe has paused to let you breathe. We were lulled into a sleepy state by good company. Someone played a guitar badly and everyone pretended not to notice. Around 2 a.m. the forest grew too still. Even the crickets seemed to hold their breath. I remember waking to see small points of light high above, not moving like the blink of birds, but steady, focused, arranged like a constellation turned inward. At first I thought it was dew catching the moon, or fireflies. But they were too patient, too deliberate. They formed a ring and inside that ring the canopy took on a depth, like a stage with its lights focused. My friend Sarah whispered that she felt watched. We turned our heads and counted, dozens, maybe 100 small focused reflections. They were not just eyes, they had a quality like old lanterns hung and lowered until they watched at face level. Then one light separated and descended like a slow thought. It struck the ground in a soft, scorched mark near our pack. For a second the air tasted of rust. We glared and fumbled for shoes, but the light rolled away and stopped. The next day there were no scorch marks, only a small depression in the ash as if a coin had made indentations. Our ropes were retied with knots none of us could tie. On the straps of our bags someone had left tiny folded leaves arranged in small, careful patterns. We talked to a ranger at the edge of the park during checkout, and he told us of watching groves where old trees, resinous and glossy, reflected light in odd ways at certain angles. He said folklore called them eye trees and that campers sometimes felt the place recorded their presence like a camera. Most times it's only light and your imagination, he said. Other times folks come back with little arrangements of things they deny making. We still camp, but that night taught us to respect how small details shape memory. I dream of tiny lights falling like coins into a bowl and the quiet circling of a canopy that looks like a face when you don't want to see one. There are spots in the woods I avoid now, clearings that are small and ringed with stone. Every so often I will say the name of someone I love when the wind is strange, as if speaking aloud can rebalance whatever listened. Story 3. The last account came to me from a volunteer at the park. He had spent years clearing trails and checking on lost hikers. His hands looked like someone who had known tools intimately, and his voice carried the slow cadence of someone who'd learned patience in the outdoors. He described a late afternoon when the woods hummed and the leaves seemed to speak to each other. He and his partner were checking an old logging road when they heard a voice call a child's name, Tommy. It was soft and thin like smoke. The voice asked in tones both urgent and gentle. The volunteers radioed dispatch and then followed the sound, not because they hoped to find anything cinematic, but because someone asks for a child and anyone who knows forest hours listens. In a shaded dip, they found a scatter of toys laid as if on a small altar. There was a plastic car, a fuzzy rabbit, a ribbon knotted into a bow, and a small handmade card with a picture of a house. The items looked untouched by rain, as if the forest had preserved them in a pocket of weather. The voice kept calling. The volunteers felt an odd compulsion to answer it. They called back, but their radios returned only static. The search team arrived within the hour, but there was no sign of tracks. The toys disappeared by the time they returned with the ranger. No dirt marked them, no prints led away. It was like someone had set them down and then taken them into a pocket. The volunteers later learned of a decades-old report. A child had wandered away in a storm near that ridge and been found hours later cold and disoriented but alive. The family moved soon after, and the place gained a small, sorrowful legend. The volunteer told me he now leaves small offerings at certain trailheads, a stone with a stripe, a wrapped sweet, a scrap of paper with a child's name. It's symbolic, he told me, but there is an ethic of attention in these places. If something calls, at least someone answered. If any part of these stories echoes something you've experienced, please write in. You can share a short note with the location, time, and what you remember. If you want privacy, say so. I respect anonymous submissions. When you write, include small details you might think are trivial: a sound, a smell, the color of a ribbon. Those details often become the threads that connect different accounts. Thank you for listening to these 3 true forest encounters. If you'd like, I can prepare ideogram prompts for each story and a thumbnail prompt, plus a YouTube-ready title, description, and tags. Subscribe if you want more long-form collections. Hike safe, travel in groups when you can, and if the woods go very quiet, remember there is still a world beyond the tree line waiting for you to return. Stay careful. Stay curious. Stay kind to the places you pass through.